Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. I'm joined by my guest today. Really excited to have him, Ryan Christiansen. How are you today, Ryan?
I'm doing really well. Thank you.
Excellent. Ryan is the executive director of the Stena Center for Financial Technology. Really excited about today's show. It's Bridging Academia and Industry in FinTech. This is a first of our kind doing a show like this where we have someone who's in a position to bridge those two gaps. So I'm going to jump into Ryan's bio and introduce him, and then we'll jump into the show. Ryan is the executive director of the Stena Center for Financial Technology at the University of Utah. In this role, Ryan directs and coordinates the labs, venture fund, incubator, student programs focus of the center. Ryan previously served as a senior vice president of data access partnerships at MasterCard. In this role, Ryan led the acquisition and management of consumer permission financial data for MasterCard International Open Banking, which includes the industry-leading efforts to move to tokenized data acquisition methods. His work and leadership have led to data access agreements with many of the largest financial institutions in the country. Ryan also represented MasterCard in industry efforts around consumer financial data access, consumer consent, privacy, and data handling practices. He is an impassioned advocate for expanding FinTech. Ryan has been instrumental in the foundation of the Financial Data Exchange and frequently shares his insights with many other FinTech industry groups and initiatives. Ryan is influencing the future of FinTech in the state of Utah as the co-chair of the Governance FinTech Council. He is also the co-chair of the certification working group of the Financial Data Exchange, an industry standards body that develops international standards for open banking. Welcome to the show, Ryan. Love to have you today, man. You have a really extensive background, especially.
Well, thank you for that fine introduction. We're gonna have to stop letting my mom write introductions for me. That's just too much.
You have to love them. I'm sure she's extremely proud of you and everything you've accomplished over the years.
Yes, well, I'm very excited to chat with you today.
All right, excellent. So, today's show, like I said, this is the first time of us doing a show like this in which we have someone who's in academia, but also industry and has found a way to really merge those two together. So, maybe we can start off by that. Can we just start off with the Stena Foundation? What exactly is that in your role there?
Yeah, so I'll just clarify something. The Stena Foundation is a foundation that is our major donor, and so consequently, we've taken on the name of the Stena Financial Technology Center here at the University of Utah. My role at the University of Utah is the executive director of the center, and we've got a variety of things that we're doing to really try to extend, expand, and really create impacts within FinTech. I can walk into some of the details, but the big realization here in setting up a center at the University of Utah to focus on FinTech was that this is a very fast-growing field. There's a lot of jobs available for students, and so that's really important to get that right. But there's also a lot of technological advancements that we'd like to have some impacts on. And there's just a new way of thinking about finance as well. And so that thought leadership piece is a big part of what our focus is as well. And we can jump into some more of the details, but that's the general idea. And I will tell you that the mission of the center is to develop and cement Utah as a global fintech hub, and we've got a lot of reasons to believe that that's very possible. And we started thinking about what programs we would do to be impactful in that mission around a thesis of fintech is multidisciplinary in the sense that you've got technology, obviously, where a lot of the innovation is happening, and we've seen that over a number of years with fintech. You obviously have finance, which is a place where so many things happen that really create the economy, and then the piece that maybe isn't always thought about, but the third ingredient that we think about is regulation, because as soon as you have innovation start touching the U.S. financial system, now you're in a highly regulated space, and it's important that anyone that's participating in that space gets that part right. And so that's kind of the big picture, if you will, on what we think about at the FinTech Center.
Thanks for that correction in terms of the Stena Center and the FinTech Center. The FinTech
Sure.
Center. Appreciate that. I want to understand some of that transition, right? You did a lot of stuff in the industry with MasterCard. Can you explain or give some insight on why you made the decision to go in this route, in which it's academia, but like you said, there is some industry aspects of fintech that you're exploring and you want to develop Utah. But how was that transition and why?
My transition to that? Yeah, sure. I have to tell you, it was not an easy decision to make. I've spent my entire career in industry, and I've always really enjoyed it. So 20 some odd years as a banker, and then about 7-8 years in a fintech company. I started with Finicity, and we grew that from a startup essentially to a company that was acquired by MasterCard in 2020. And then after the acquisition, there was a lot of work around how to take what Finicity had built and scale it even further, as well as internationalize it, which was really a hell of a lot of fun to work on. Along the way, we had started doing some work with the University of Utah on some of our programs that we had at Finicity and MasterCard. And so I got to know some of the folks at the University of Utah, including President Randall. That led to some conversations about some initiatives that had been taking place at the University of Utah. And President Randall said, I'd really like to get these efforts really focused. And I think developing a center is a way that we can get that focus. And, would you be interested in coming and standing up that center and starting things out for us? And again, it was a pretty difficult decision. I like to joke that President Randall's a very difficult person to say no to. But in addition to that, he's really brilliant and strategic in his thinking. And so the ability to maybe switch out of that industry into the academics had that startup kind of excitement feeling to it. And so I decided to take the switch and come see what academics was like. And it is very different. But it's been a lot of fun. I can tell you, I look out my window and I can see where the student housing is, and in the last couple of weeks, all the students have started showing up for class, and there's something about a fresh group of students coming in every year that are so excited about the future and how they're going to try to be impactful that you don't get anywhere else. And so that's been a lot of fun.
That's really interesting to say that, and in my career, early on, I was working for when I was during undergrad, I was working for my university, one of the departments, while I was in college. Mm-hmm. And then after college, after I graduated, it just transitioned to a full-time role. And after that, doing that for a little bit, I then went into got my first job in a investment bank and so forth. So I did it the opposite way. And some of the things you see, I mean, you helped me. I'm right now. I'm just thought about that too in terms of the difference. And I was going to ask you a question like, what's one major difference that you see? And I think for me, making that transition was quite a while ago because we're talking about the late 90s, right?
Okay.
To the 2000s. So for me, it was a while. But one of the major differences at that time, the sense of urgency.
Yeah.
That's one of the major differences that I saw from my transition going the opposite way that you just did. What about you?
Yeah, there's definitely a difference in the terms of urgency. And there's also a bit of a kind of a schedule to that as well, right? Like I said, the students show up at a certain time each year, and you have this cadence around that, and that's just the heartbeat of a school, whether it's college, high school, kindergarten, even. There's a schedule that happens, and there's a start and a stop time, and so you end up kind of navigating around that, but also to the point of what's the urgency. I mean, you have faculty that studies tulip crises from hundreds of years ago, right? There's just there's a difference in maybe some of the focus. Now, I joke about that a little bit, but it's not unimportant work either, right? Just some of those learnings that you get out of the deep academic research is critical, and oftentimes it's what gives us these technological advances. So not only do you get to look back and learn from things that have happened in the past and been rigorously studied, but you also have that innovation that's happening kind of in a lab environment that doesn't have the same maybe pressures as industry does. And I think that's one of the other things I would call out is the removal of profit motive in an academic setting is another big difference. And that may have some interplay in that urgency part as well, right? But the fact that there isn't that profit motive, so to speak, does allow you to do some of these laboratory sorts of things that can lead to massive advancements in a variety of things: biotechnology, information technology, lots of different examples there.
No, I think that's an excellent point that you brought up regarding the profit incentive, because like now I've been in my PhD studies, and working between both worlds. I'm hardcore industry. That's my foundation.
Yeah.
But also reinserting myself in the academic environment and working with my advisor and looking at how certain labs are run is just really about that deep knowledge where, and you can respect this coming from a startup. I worked at startups, I also do certain things is, we have to get to market. How do we get this thing to market? What's the fastest way? Are we going to do some sort of, just like product market fit? And we have to figure out the fastest way to get there. We have to experiment. We have to fail fast, and we have to test it out with real customers. Yep. Where, in the academic world, it's just like, all right, let's work on this project. Let's really try to understand different nuances there, like you said, because the profit side is not this. Really, just can we get a deep understanding? Okay, can we look at other research papers and see, okay, are there gaps? Can we then do this? And it's just really that exploring, aspect of it. So being currently in a situation where you see the two worlds, that's what I see. With your role though, and you coming from a startup, you have almost like the best of three worlds. And here's why I say that. You worked in a startup that got big enough to get acquired, right? So the investors are happy. That's a great exit. Yep. Then you merged into a huge now international financial firm in MasterCard. So you see how that works.
Yep.
And now you're in an academic environment. But, I see the value, especially with the Stena Center. And you mentioned that one of the goals is to make Utah the FinTech hub and the part that you play in that. Seeing all those different angles to me makes you like invaluable, because you're bringing so much to the table just from real life lived experiences. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's funny when you mentioned that the experience has been very different. We joke about that around the dinner table at my house a bit with the family, that the fact that, a banker to technologist to academics, it's not a path I would have been able to draw for sure. And even some of the pieces within that were not, entirely known, right? Like even just being at a startup and being able to get to a place where we can be acquired by an international company like MasterCard. It's frankly a little jaw dropping to me that that's been the experience. The fun part for me is being able to have that impact. And when we were building things at Finicity, I used to tell this story about how my great grandfather, he was a painter, and one of the things he did was he painted the ceilings on these train stations that you see, some of these big grandiose train stations. He would do some of those murals, and so and then his son went into the railroad business, and so I had the pleasure, I guess, of traveling by railroad occasionally when I was growing up, and I would be in a railroad station sometimes, and the family would point and say, "See, Grandpa painted that." And my feeling has been, like when we were building things at Finicity and the things we're building now at the university, is that it's a really unique opportunity for me to build some things that people are using in their everyday lives now, that I can point at and say I had a part of that. And to the extent that I can create scenarios in which other people can have that experience too, it's really fills me with a lot of hope and gratitude and excitement. So yeah, that's it. It has been an interesting journey. I think the stitching that ties a lot of it together is that ability to go out and kind of have a little bit of a difference that feels like it's positive for what's going on out in the world. So that's I'm not sure how else to summarize that, but that's been kind of maybe some common themes.
I mean, that's perfect. Let's jump into the student journey right now, right?
Sure.
Because you have students coming from different perspectives, right? Some want to get into FinTech, like you said, they want to graduate, maybe work at a startup, work at a bank, right? Some want to be entrepreneurs from gate. They're like, you know what? I don't know what I want to start, but I want to start something and I want to build something. Some, right? You have some that I would assume researcher. They're researchers. They're like, you know what? I'm a researcher. Probably want to go to graduate school, maybe go to PhD, but I want to research and write papers and things of that.
Yeah.
Can you describe how the Stena Center is working with students in those three categories and the journey with that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, a lot of students go to college, the university, to get the degree that helps them get into a job market with some sort of advantage and some hope for a good paying job, right? And the degree really helps with that. To that end, we offer FinTech classes because one of the things we know from our studies is that FinTech tends to be fairly high paying jobs. And there's, despite the fact that there's been a little bit of retrenchment over the last year or two within FinTech and technology, it's still a pretty fast growing space. And I'll give a little bit of context around that. So if you think about, hey, I'm a student, I'm going to get a FinTech degree and I'm going to go work in FinTech. Well, I think where you may go end up working could surprise some people. You look at JP Morgan Chase, for example, and the millions of dollars that they spend on technology. That's the reason that Jamie Dimon says that they're a technology company. And they've invested very heavily in FinTech initiatives. And so I think that's going to be something you're going to continue to see in banking. I suspect that over the next decade or so, you could see up to a quarter of all jobs in any bank be FinTech related jobs because of the partnerships that are happening there and some of the acquisitions that banks are making. So yes, if you're a student and you want to go get into the FinTech market and work for a FinTech, I think that looks like you're working for maybe what we would classically think of as a FinTech company. Maybe it's working for a bank. Maybe you're working for a technology company that does identity that has some really big impacts in FinTech. So I think there's a variety of different jobs that you could end up in by studying FinTech. So that's maybe the first area. The second area that you refer to is that entrepreneurship piece. And one thing that's pretty exciting is that the University of Utah has a perennially top 5 ranked entrepreneur program in the country. And so as an example of the kind of impacts that has, we have a couple of companies that have come through that entrepreneur program and our Masters of Business Creation and come into our incubator that are now doing work in FinTech. So there's a path, I guess is what I'm trying to say, for that entrepreneur that can study entrepreneurship, they can study FinTech. There's some ways that they can go out and maybe get some of that early funding and some support. So a lot of different ways that if you're a student at the University of Utah that has some entrepreneurial desire, a lot of different resources there. And one of the things that we're focused on is how to commercialize things that are living within the university as quickly as we can in FinTech. So I mentioned biotechnology a few minutes ago. The University of Utah has a very big health sciences, hospital health network. And there's been a lot of success in spinning out companies from that group. The challenge there is it tends to be a fairly long life cycle to get through a startup of life sciences, right? All the FDA approvals and everything. Whereas FinTech is such a fast-moving industry. In fact, funny, we have a lot of students that sign up for their first FinTech class because the professor that teaches that doesn't use a textbook. And so people hear that, the students hear that, and they say, no textbook, I'm in. Which concerned me a little bit because I was like, great, we're attracting the lazy ones. But what it was is the faculty member said, it's moving too fast. By the time we have a textbook, it's out of date. And so he's one of the most well-read people in FinTech I've ever met in my life. And he brings that into the classroom and students love it. So it's really fast pace. And we think that there's a lot of opportunity to find some of that, those seeds that are germinating around a new idea that we can get out into the commercial space and help get that into the commercial space as quickly as possible through some of our programs. So that's where we kind of help out with the entrepreneurship. And then for those students that are really interested in being in academics, lots of programs. We have a big research group here. I think at the University of Utah, we're over $750 million a year in research dollars right now. One of the top 65, I think, with a goal to get to $1 billion in research a year. Within the FinTech space, we're supporting that we have some programs where master's students can come in and we have research projects that they can work on to start learning some of that that skill set. And so we work with industry partners to find those research opportunities, bring them into the university. Then those students have a chance to work directly on those research projects and work directly with the company too. So they kind of get both angles, which is pretty valuable. So yeah, lots of different programs. I know that's kind of a long answer, but it's a pretty big scope as well. Yeah.
Perfect. It was a long question, so it needed a long answer. Hey, so and when you were talking about the entrepreneurial program and the FinTech program, in terms of classes, can you give me like a high level overview, like the entrepreneurial side? We get into the FinTech after. What are some of the classes one would take towards an entrepreneurial path?
Yeah, so there's classes around developing your market fit, your go-to-market plan. There's classes around developing your financial statements. There's classes around developing that first, that minimum viable product. So a lot of things like that, foundational. What does it take to create a business? And then one of the other things that the entrepreneur program does that's just brilliant is, you can sit in a class and learn some of those things, but they have these contests all the time where someone says, I want to start my business, and they'll start the business. And a lot of them are really, quite small. And the entrepreneur program hosts gatherings where the students get to essentially vote by, putting a card in a jar or something like that for the best presentation or the coolest product. And the Entrepreneur Center will give out small grants, $500 to $5,000, that they get to pitch throughout the year. So it's not just one time. They get $500 on the first pitch. They might get $1,000 on the next pitch a few months later. And so it teaches them how to, one, pitch the business, right? Tell the story. Two, how to get a product that really kind of seems to match what people are asking for. So that's, a little bit outside of the classroom, but it's that practical application of what they're learning in some of those, financial management classes and so forth.
That's really interesting. That sounds excellent. What about the, FinTech type of classes? Like you mentioned, this particular professor, there's no textbook per se. How does that work? Like what are they learning there?
Yeah, so there's a lot of study around blockchain, for instance. There's even a blockchain club that's been formed because some students had such a passion in it that they formed a blockchain club, and they look at tokenization that can be managed on the chain, and so there's that. They study the U.S. payments system. They look at global payment systems. They look at data science and data management. So it's a bit of it's an intro class, that no textbook class, and it's a broad spectrum of here's several pieces of FinTech and the fundamentals of those pieces. And then as you move on, there's some more advanced classes. And in fact, we're developing a master's degree right now where you get a little more deep into, how would you develop a FinTech product? What are some of the regulations? So we've got a class we're developing right now on the regulatory framework that impacts FinTech and some things like that. So yeah, it runs from broad and shallow to fairly focused and deep, depending on where you're at in your core studies.
Got it. And really, I like the model. It makes perfect sense. What are some of the challenges you face, in your role in trying to go towards the Stena Center's mission in terms of, bridging the academia and industry? What are some of the challenges you face?
Well, I think challenge number one would be that we're fairly new. So we started in January of 23. So we're about a year and a half in.
Wow.
Luckily, we're at the point where we're starting to see things for the second or third time. So we're learning, processes. But anytime you're doing something new, it's challenging. And, we started with a blank sheet.
Honestly, in talking to you, I thought it was there for a lot longer. I didn't know it was just a year. You guys have seemed to have accomplished a lot in this one plus years.
Yeah, I get told by some leadership here at the university that we're about where they thought we would be at year 5 or 6. So I guess that's good, but we've got definitely some of the battle scars to show it. We're trying to move fast. Our team wakes up with a pretty big sense of urgency every day on trying to get some things completed and done.
Do you feel your past in working in industry and startups played into why the center progressed so far in a year? Like you said, some of the from the leadership is saying, "Wow, we thought where you're at now, it would have taken 5 years." Do you feel that played a role in the success of the center?
Yeah, I think that one, we're playing in a fertile field, which is nice. The fintech is exciting. There's a lot of excitement around it, and so we've got the good luck of being in a space that's fast moving and has a lot of people that are interested in it. So that, I would say, that's thing number one. Thing number two is, it's a pretty impassioned group. Most of the people that we have hired are out of industry. And so that's helped us connect with industry pretty well, and we've had a lot of success there. So we've reached out to industry and said, how can we help you with talent recruitment? How can we help you with research? How can we help you with thought leadership? And had a lot of success there. And I think it's because we knew the industry so well, we've been able to bring them into academics and create some of these early momentum impacts. Now, one of the challenges is, like I say, I'm not from academics, and I've had to learn, how things work in an academic program. And so, I'll just give you for instance, we're talking about some of the research that industry wants, and I learned that, that doesn't always line up exactly with maybe some of the research that faculty has been doing. And so when we're trying to find a researcher, that can be challenging sometimes. And so we've had to figure out how to develop out some research capabilities. But what the other piece is the faculty is interested in getting some published work out there around, their research, right? And so we said, hey, we probably need to support that, and have just started now writing some grants for faculty to get funded to do some of their research that doesn't necessarily have practical application, but really has some real value in peer-reviewed published works. And so we're doing practical application research and peer-reviewed academic journal research now. If I'm being honest, it took me a year to figure that out, that was, something that we need to be thinking about. So, again, an opportunity and a challenge.
And I'm big on models. I'm big on process, right? That's just my computer science background and technology background. And what I see, right, is you've been given a clean slate. You have your background in industry. You come into this academic environment, and you're putting sort of things in place. Do you feel that a model can be created for other universities to emulate what you guys are accomplishing?
Yeah, I would. I've got two thoughts there in terms of the model. So one, we definitely took a unique approach, and I think it's working. And the unique approach is, I talked about the multidisciplinary of tech, the tech, the finance, and the regulatory. So when we formed the center, we formed it as a cross-disciplinary center that works directly with the colleges of business in the finance department, in the College of Engineering, in the computer science program and the School of Law. Now, generally, when you see programs or centers at universities, they live in one of those colleges, and there doesn't tend to, it's a lot like industry, quite frankly. It gets kind of siloed, and we didn't want to end up siloed because we thought that would, kind of create the same problem that exists in industry, in that you're not taking that full horizon view. So from a model perspective, I think that's something that other universities would certainly probably want to take a look at. May or may not work for every university. I'll give you a funny example. I was talking to someone at the engineering school about some capstone projects, and as we were chatting, I had the thought that, wow, some of these capstone projects sounds like they could actually have some real business viability. And so I asked the engineering faculty, is that the case? And he said, yeah, I think so. But they just don't have the engineering students often don't have a lot of business acumen. And so it doesn't get off the ground oftentimes because of that. And I literally looked out the window. I was like, I can see the business school right here, and there's students that are trying to figure out, business problems that have solutions, right? And so just being able to just put those things together, it's a big deal, right? But it may not be the way that, people in industry and academics wake up and think every day, right? Because you do get into the silos. So we've tried to, be really deliberate about that model. Now, the other thing that I think we have done, and this I think has some broad application, but it also might have some uniqueness. We started again, like I said, with a clean slate of what are we going to do, right? And we had a mission, we had a thesis. Now what? And so we thought about, let's do 4 programming areas where we think we can be impactful. One of them is academics. I talked a little bit about that. We've got course development, we've got degrees, things like that. 2, let's think about industry partnerships. We've talked about a little bit. How do we partner with industry to do internships, to do career fairs for FinTech students, to do research, to do laboratories, so that we can directly on say an industry partners platform and have students have access to that platform to tinker and learn. So that's the partnerships part. We have, and so we run a lot of labs and research through there. The third section is our venture side. Hey, we're pretty close to some things that could be developed into businesses. Let's have early stage funding as part of our program. So we've got the venture side, and then the last piece is, we want to be a hub, we want to be a thought leader. So we're going to do a conference, and that's the 4th programming area. And so the conference is where we bring all of that together, and we bring in thought leaders and decision makers from academia, from industry, from lawmakers and regulators to our annual conference. And we focus on the technological, economic, and regulatory drivers in FinTech on a year-over-year basis. And so that's how we put it together, was like, these are our 4 programming areas. We want to make progress on each of those every day. And it served us well to have a roadmap like that. And so I think, that's important. There are other FinTech programs at other universities. There's not a lot of them yet, but, I think there's more coming. My advice would be, get your roadmap. That's not uncommon, but it's important and sometimes overlooked.
No, I absolutely love it, because when I was in school, my master's, I went to my master's in cybersecurity. I was at Florida. Oh, yeah. And at the time, that was a new program they were standing up. And then what we saw see, that was in 2015-ish, I think, or 14, 15, 16, 15, 14. Anyway, the whole point is, right, when you were talking about the program and the different areas, it reminded me of that experience and how different universities at the time were standing up their cybersecurity master's program and so forth. And then with everything that you mentioned, that's what they did, right? They had the yearly conference in which they got some government agencies involved to come through, the cybersecurity departments from there. They formed industry partnerships by bringing in professors from the industry. And also, like, one of my professors he worked, two professors actually were FBI. One was an FBI agent, one could work in the FBI in terms of stuff like that. Yeah. And, so it's really interesting, how what you described. We didn't have the venture side. Definitely try to take advantage of that. And, but everything else that you described, we had. So I just find it interesting when, in academics, when they're standing up these type of programs, it seems like, they have certain pillars, like foundational pillars. You obviously have aspects. Can you describe the venture side, right, for the early stage startups?
Yeah, so the venture fund, the studio fund is one. It's actually separate from the university because it's really hard to do a venture fund in a university, and we wanted to make some progress. So it's actually a separate fund, but we've got an arrangement with the fund that we give some services essentially to the fund, and then the fund takes some of the carry, the profits, and invest back into the center, so we can create this flywheel effect of, we're trying to create success, and the success creates some more success by expanding center activities. So that's the way that it's set up. But the fund itself is focused on, like I said, very early stage. So incubator, accelerator, or maybe seed, pre-seed. Somebody that has an idea that hasn't gotten to an MVP and needs some funding to get to MVP, and maybe some support. So the incubator program connects the founder with an advisor, connects them with some service providers for legal help, marketing help, technology, IT help, AWS credits, things like that. Gives some office space so you've got a place to go to work, and then has some programs around helping develop some OKRs and be able to report on those OKRs. And then at the end of that program, the founder has a chance to do the demo of their MVP at our annual conference. Then if you're in the seed level, you've got your MVP out the door, you've got some early customers, some early revenue, but it's still, small, really small. And so that's still got all the same kind of services available, office space and other services, but the focus is a little bit more about scaling that up, and the advisors that are aligned with those companies have had a lot of experience with that kind of work. So yeah, that's the program there. And again, we work with all the universities and colleges in the state. It's not specific just to University of Utah students or faculty or alum. It's open to all of anyone that's a student, faculty, or alum from a Utah higher ed organization. We have a big tent approach, and again, going back to our mission of building out Utah as a global fintech hub, we think that's how we serve that purpose.
That's pretty cool. Just to clarify for the audience, OKR is objective and key results. The next question I have for you: can they could be a graduate or alumni or faculty of a university in Utah, but university within Utah, not just the University of Utah, just in general? Do they have to live in Utah though? So if I graduated and I moved, had a great idea, how does that process work?
Yeah, so we're looking to fund Utah domiciled companies, again, going back to that goal that we have. So we do have that geographic limitation. Yeah.
And next, if I have an idea and I moved to Utah, but I didn't attend a university in Utah, then can I have access to the venture studio?
So we do have an exception that a certain percentage of the fund can be allocated to exceptions, but it is an exception.
Got it. No, look, very, very interesting. I know one of the stats that I was reading, a couple of stats, very interesting about Utah that I didn't even know until doing some research for the show. 1 out of every 61 venture-backed companies become a unicorn, right? That's a Utah state. The next one, 4th largest global location for Goldman Sachs. 8 out of 10 largest industrial loan banks headquartered in Utah. 18% growth in technology and finance employment over the last 5 years.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm a New Yorker, so I don't really. I live like 2 hours away right now, but in general, we growing up in New York, working in finance in New York throughout my career, it's like New York was the pinnacle at that time. Yes. So I didn't know these stats about Utah. I found that very interesting while reading it in preparation to talk to you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned New York, because New York's the financial hub of the world, right? Not just the U.S., but the world. And and if we look at Utah and we say what's some of the uniqueness of Utah, and especially as it applies to fintech, and you hit on some of the entrepreneurial pieces as well, like where's maybe some of our unfair advantages that we can exploit, right? And one, we tend to punch above our weight in terms of creating value with startups. There's it's one of the highest success rates in terms of creating unicorns in the state of Utah. And if you look at it from a per capita basis, very much above almost everyone. It's I think there's a few reasons for that. I don't know what they all are, but it's a thing, and it's got research behind it that says, it's really a thing. So if you look at fintech in Utah, since MasterCard was acquired in 2020, in that 4 or 5 year period, there was 4 unicorn exits just in fintech companies in Utah, which is extraordinary. So it's a great place. And you had mentioned the industrial banks. That's such a key differentiator in financial services and fintech in the state of Utah. So if you look at industrial loan banks, it's a different type of charter where you can have a company like BMW that starts a bank because they've got some things that they'd like to have some bank services around. Another one that is Square, that actually formed an industrial bank. So it's a very unique charter, and over 80% of industrial bank assets are held in the state of Utah. So it's a big concentration. In that industrial bank sector, there tends to be, it over indexes in terms of industrial banks that participate in fintech partnerships. So like that sponsor banking space, a lot of that happening in Utah. And that's one of the major drivers of fintech. And so when we think about Utah as a fintech hub, that's a major component that doesn't exist at the level anywhere else, at the same level anywhere else in the United States. Go ahead.
Interesting. So I've been on a roll lately in which, in talking to certain guests like that just have insight on different things, we start coming up with show topics for future show. And I would really, really like to explore that industrial bank, Utah. What does it mean? How does it work? I'm really curious. Like, since you brought that up now, I'm really curious. Is that something that you can speak on in depth?
A little bit. There's some people here that are way better at it than I am. They're the Industrial Bankers Association is headquartered here in Utah, and they're they're fantastic. In fact, it's funny. I was speaking at their conference last week, and the way that I started my speech was I looked at the president of the Square Bank and asked him, "Hey, Lou, are you a fintech or are you a bank?" Right? Because if you think about Square, I mean, it feels a lot like a fintech, right? They are definitely a bank charter, and his answer was yes. And he didn't know I was going to ask the question, but I wanted to kind of illuminate this merging of financial technology with banking. I think it really is not going to be fintechs and banks anymore. It is financial technology, and it's a big part of banking, and it's also a big part of what's happening in tech. But yeah, I'd be happy to kind of help you out on some future topics there. It's a very interesting space, and the head of the Industrial Bankers Association, he likes to tell the story of the fact that when the charter was approved, there was some concern that maybe these industrial banks would compete with community banks and maybe unfairly, or they would have some sort of advantage because of their charter. And so there was this provision put into the charter that you could not have a branch banking system, so that no branches. And that was to put a little bit of a limiter there. Well, what I think happened there, what the industrial bankers head says all the time was it created this innovative kind of group, right? And so that's why they've leaned so heavily, I think, into this sponsor banking and some of the other innovations that happen at the industrial bank level.
That's definitely fascinating. We're going to take a brief message from our sponsor, and then I want to ask you a question on the future of the Stena Center and like maybe a sneak peek into what you have going on. So we're going to take a brief moment for our sponsors and be right back.
Great.
Are you an emerging fintech with a limited budget seeking more sales and partners? Introducing Strategic Generation, your partner in leveraging cybersecurity for sales and partner enablement. Fintechs often lose opportunities due to unsophisticated cybersecurity programs. That's where we come in. Strategic Generation assists with due diligence, security posture visibility, penetration testing, and on-demand virtual CISO services. We connect your systems to our partnered platform, and voila! Instant access to real-time diagnostics and compliance frameworks such as SOC 2 and PCI DSS. Gain the confidence of prospects and partners. Strengthen your cybersecurity program and drive success. Stop losing deals due to cybersecurity. Visit strategicgeneration.com and click on On-Demand CISO to connect with an expert.
Great, with that, Ryan, final question for you. I want to understand, like, give us a sneak peek, right? What you said earlier really stuck with me in terms of what you were able to accomplish in the last year. The expectation from your leadership was that would have taken 5 years. Can you give us a glimpse of the future of the Stena Center? Like, what do you have cooking?
Yeah, sure. Because we do have a lot going on. We really do try to stay in our lane in the sense that we've got these 4 programming areas, and we just go really hard on those 4 programming areas. And so what does that future look like? Well, I think one, our conference is just becoming more and more well attended and becoming a place for some big time networking and for introductions to be done or deals to be done. So, continuing to grow that out is a pretty big deal. And I'll mention that, in the bio, there was the mention of the financial data exchange and the what we often call FDX. And FDX is more than likely going to be named the standards body for the new Dodd-Frank 1033 rule that's impacting every bank in the country over the next 3 to 4 years. And so what that means is if you're a bank, you're going to have to stand up a developer portal to enable consumers to get access to their financial records digitally, right? And so it's been almost 10 years ago we formed FDX to build a standard to do that with, and that group has a twice-a-year conference, and they're going to put their winter conference at the same time as our conference, so that we can just keep bringing more and more people that are thinking about these things into the same space. And I think you'll continue to see more of that kind of stuff happening, so that, if you're in fintech and you're going to go travel somewhere and meet other people in fintech, you're probably going to be in Salt Lake City at some point at one of these get-togethers or our conference. So that's one of the things. Continuing to build out the academic programs with we're really supporting the faculty there, and so getting to a space where we've got a master's program, an undergrad program. We already have the minor, and that's got students enrolled up to the maximum capacity that we can hold in those classes. So far, that's been the case. By the way, we've got about, I think I mentioned, maybe 70 students enrolled in fintech classes right now. We've had to lift the caps on our classes to let some students in. So continuing to build that out, so that what the future looks like, I think, is that if you're a company that wants to hire fintech talent, the very first place you're going to look is the graduates coming out of the University of Utah. And the other piece, I think, is on this. We haven't talked a lot about the partnerships, but some of the research and the lab work, I think, is probably going to be driving some of the thought leadership well into the future. We're looking at, you had the Chevron decision by the Supreme Court recently, and that's impacting what agencies are able to do in terms of rules. I think that's going to have a very big impact in the regulation of financial services. And so we're starting to dig in right now on what does that look like? What should it look like, right? Because now the Supreme Court has essentially said, hey, agency, you don't get to make up all the rules, or if you do make up the rules and there's a challenge, it's a legitimate challenge. And so the onus has been maybe put back more onto Congress to get more specificity into how these laws are going to be implemented. And what I think that looks like is that the lawmakers are going to want more thought leadership on how those laws should look. And we're leaning into that in a very big way. We're also, I've got this grand vision of having access to every platform that runs the U.S. financial system available to our students. So I used to work at MasterCard. MasterCard's big in open banking now. I would love to have access to MasterCard's full open banking platform, their payments networks, and everything else, so that students can learn on those. You've got real-time payments happening through TCH and the Fed now. So when a student comes through our program, and we're not at this place yet, I'm future casting. I would like for our students to have had the opportunity to work directly on every platform that runs the U.S. financial system from a technological standpoint. And then when you think about that, I mean, what a wonderful thing, right? You've got students that have actually been working on the things that make the system run coming out of school. So that's another big focus. And we've had some successes there. We've been working with, for instance, LoanPro. They gave us access to their platform. Students have been doing projects on that. LoanPro has been working with the students to develop problem statements for them to work on, do that work on the LoanPro platform. This platform is what you would be working on if you worked at LoanPro, or if, say, you were a customer of LoanPro, and our students have access to that. LoanPro hired students directly out of that lab because they've had a chance to work directly with them and they liked what they saw. So that's another big piece of the future, is that labs and partnerships. So yeah, we definitely have some grand visions. There's no lack of small or big thinking, I should say.
It sounds absolutely awesome. And one of the things, and I'll follow up with you via email offline. I definitely want to collaborate in terms of just the information sharing and stuff like that we can also, put on our show and form some sort of partnership, information sharing, bringing some of your people on, because I think it just makes for a really good discussion, especially some of the future things that you're talking about. Really sounds excellent. So one of our traditions for our show, we give our guests a platform to talk about how people can find you, any final thoughts and so forth. So I'm going to let you do that, and I'm going to get off the stage.
Okay, well, thank you. And boy, you left the stage before I had a chance to really say thanks. It's a wonderful opportunity to share what we do here at the Stena FinTech Center. And we would love, if you wanted to get more information, to go to our website. It's I wish I knew that off the top of my head, so that's a little bit of an embarrassment. But if you look up the Stena FinTech Center online, you can find us. It's got all the socials there. You can follow our socials and see what we're up to. And if you would like to reach out, we always make sure we get back quickly so we can do follow up and get connected and work together. So thank you.
No worries. And no worries on the URL. We'll definitely put it up when the show's live. We can't do it now. But when the show's live, we'll do it. But it's the Stena, STENA .utah.edu.
That's right.
STENA.utah.edu. So no worries on that. Thank you very much for being a guest on the show. A lot of information. I took away a lot of nuggets throughout this conversation. Definitely appreciate this. I joke around a lot, and it's half joke, half true. One of the reasons I started this platform is I'm extremely curious. So a lot of the guests that I bring on, I want to learn. It just happens that people are watching as well, so they get the benefit from it. But it is a lot, and so I really enjoyed this conversation. A lot of things that I didn't think about. I'm obviously in industry, but also in academia and things of that nature. So just talking to someone that's currently in it, moved from it, it was just, I find it fascinating. So, and definitely, drilling into fintech, and I'm going to definitely follow up with you offline. I'm interested in that conference. We're going to be at the we're going to be press at the Money 2020 conference coming up.
Oh yeah.
So, are you going to be there?
Yep, I will be there. So I'd love to connect there. And our conference is in January 23rd, 24th. So yeah, we'll get you out here. And honestly, thanks for putting together such a great platform where you share such wonderful information. And I'm really honored to have a chance to chat with you a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm going to definitely look you up on October in Vegas. Then happy that you mentioned that you'll be there. And on that note, to all, thank you very much for watching the Tech Behind FinTech. This is going to air on Friday, September 13th. So at that point, I wish you all a happy weekend. Like we always say, thanks for the comments. Thanks for the DMs. Thanks for watching it, whether you like it, whether you don't like it. A lot of people, they don't like it, but then when I talk to them or do business with them, they're like, oh, watch your show. So regardless of which, we appreciate it, whether you watch it today or next year. Definitely appreciate the viewership. On that note, Ryan, thanks again. We'll definitely be in touch, and to all, have a great day.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Are you an emerging fintech?
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.